This video is all about this Christmas tree block right here, but it's part of a series. I also have a video for the pinwheel block that I will link below. I want you to also notice that the background on these are scrappy and that there's very few Christmas fabrics in this quilt. It's all about design, not about fabrics. So just dig into your scraps and start putting one of these girls together. Later in the video, I will also have yardage requirements for 2-color quilt and for a 4-color quilt. So you'll want to stick around for that. But before we get started, I wanted to put up some quick measurements. Hi Quilty friends, and welcome to my little spot in Podunk. My name is Leanne, and today we're going to be making this cute little tree block. It's kind of modern looking, but I designed it just for a nice, simple, quick, and easy quilt that could be done really fast. If you were one of those quilt till you wilt kind of people, you could put this together in a weekend. I made it totally scrappy. This is a 2-block series. Block 1 is right here. This is the framed pinwheel, and I will link to it below. This is my color palette right here, and this is my typical color palette. I use it all the time, year-round. This isn't just for Christmas. You can also use a jelly roll because all these strips are 2.5, and you could even use part of the jelly roll on this block if you wanted to. The frame on it is 2.5-inch strips, so keep that in mind. You might want to go dig into, instead of your scrap bins, you can dig into your jelly roll stash. Now, since this is such a simple block, we're just going to stitch it together super quick. It's not going to take much time at all. I don't know that you really need too much instructions. It's just a straight stitch. There's no diagonal seams or anything like that. So as you can see, I've got all these lettered, and this is a free little printable. I mention it in every video. It's linked below. You can print these out, and you can change the color of the letters. You can change the letters. Do whatever you want to with it. I designed these. So it's just a really simple sew together. Straight stitching, but you know, this could also be made as a 2-colored quilt, which I'll put a picture of it up here while I'm stitching. I've included the yardage. However, I'm not going to tell you how many strips to cut and all that, you know. The yardage is there. It was estimated by the program that I use to design quilts, so I normally round it up to the nearest yardage. I round it up, not down. That way I'm sure to have plenty of fabric. So I'm just going to grab this next row and sew these two together. But not only is it would make a great 2-colored quilt, you could also make it a 4-colored quilt, which I'm going to put, you know, examples of that right here as well. And you know, whatever your color palette is, it doesn't have to be mine. My color palette tends to lean a little bit, you know, cutesy all the time, is what people tell me. Like, it's like they always want to know what little girl I'm making a quilt for. And it's like, me. I'm making the little girl quilt for me. I'm the little girl, just a little girl at heart. But I find that kind of funny that people think just because you're working with bright colors that it's a quilt for a little girl. But if I were working with reproduction fabrics and they recognized that they were reproduction fabrics, like 30s fabrics, they wouldn't think a thing of it. They would think, oh, she's just trying to recreate a 30s quilt. And that's what everybody did back then. And it's basically the same colors that I'm using here is 30s colors. It's just not 30s prints. But anyway, there's some examples I put up there. And it reminds me of a time when I lived in town and we had a new neighbor move in next door, and the holiday season came, and we came home one evening at, you know, it was after dark, and she's got purple lights going on inside her living room. And I'm like, what in the world? You know, Halloween's over. Why does she have her purple lights still up? And, you know, to each their own is what I thought. And then a couple weeks later, she invited me over for pumpkin spice donuts and tea. So I went over and she had a Christmas tree up that had purple lights, purple garland, and nothing but cat ornaments on it. And I'm telling you what, it wasn't bad at all. It was not my thing, but I had never seen a purple Christmas tree. So, you know, you can make this quilt any color you want. Just go dig in your favorite fabrics and make a quilt to match your decorations or your decor. So I'm just going to press these to the dark. Y'all know how I am. And if you want to press these open, it's not going to hurt a thing, because this is a very forgiving block. There's no real seams to match up when we sew this together. There's no seams to match up. We're just going to sew each row together. It's just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Super quick. And that's how the quilt's going to go together. The only seams that there are lined up when you're putting the rows together in the quilt are the quilt blocks. There's no seams to line up in the blocks, which I'll show you that in a little bit. I'm going to put, this is going to be the last row of my quilt. The rest of it's already put together. Then I'll have to put on borders. And you know, if you your quarter inch gets off with this, you know, your speed piecing, which, you know, I highly suggest, and your quarter inch gets off and you need to trim up these blocks, it's so forgiving because it's a really simple block. Nobody's going to notice if you have to trim a little bit of it off. So, you know, get in there and just pedal to the metal, because you're going to be able to trim these up if you need to. I try not to have to trim up blocks because it's so time consuming, but every once in a while it's just a necessity. We quilters are not perfect. Not one of us are perfect. So, you know, occasionally I do have to trim up blocks or units, or I make some mistakes in sewing. It's just all part of the game. That's what being, well, I forgot this last one. We'll get it. That's what being a quilter is all about. It's not about being perfect. It's about, you know, stitching the best that you can and learning how to fix those mistakes. And I mentioned that probably in every video, but I'm always, you know, thinking that there's might be a new quilter out there that thinks, hey, I can't do this block. Oh, yes, you can. Most definitely. You know, it's just a quilt. It's just fabric. And I know fabric is expensive these days, and none of us want to waste it. But even if your blocks aren't right, square them up to the size that you need, square them down to a different size, put that quilt together and call it done. It's going to keep you or somebody else warm. If it's so bad that you're just like, I don't want that displayed in my home, donate it. Donate it to the homeless, donate it to a dog shelter. Just donate it, you know, use it to go on a hayride or something. It's usable. Just because it's not perfect doesn't mean it's not usable. Over time, you'll get better. The next quilt will be better, and the one after that will be even better. And someday, you're going to be in the, you know, Paducah Quilt Hall of Fame. Okay? That's not my goal. I don't want to be in the Paducah Hall of Fame. However, I do hope that some of my quilts outlive me and my children can cherish them. All right. Now we got to do is sew these rows together. And there's nothing to pin, but I am going to put a pin in the very bottom of this, just so it stays as square as possible. Right here at the very end, I'm going to put a pin. I'm going to sew this bottom one together first. I'm going to flip it up there and sew that. First we'll pin it. Now this 1/4 inch seam, sometimes, we were talking about that, some people just have a really difficult time with it. If you have a difficult time maintaining a 1/4 inch seam, drop me a comment down below and let me know. If you're having, your seams are too big, if they're too little, you know, if there's something I can do to help you out, I'll do the best that I can to do that. And And I bring that up because a friend of mine the other day was making a quilt, and she wanted me to take a look at it. And she says, you know, what am I doing wrong? My seams aren't matching up. And so I took a look at it. And y'all, she is making a Lone Star quilt. Now, I don't know if all of you know what a Lone Star quilt is. Okay, we're just going to take this and flip it up on there and sew that on. But it's not a hard quilt, but it's not an easy quilt either. You know, it's very... Some people have some real issues putting it together, and even when you're cutting 2.5-inch strips or 3-inch strips, things can go really, really wrong. She is cutting 1-inch strips and sewing this thing together and wondering why she's having problems. It's like, well, my word, you know, most people who are making a Lone Star that small are going to paper piece it, and I wouldn't dare attempt making a Lone Star that small just because it's so finicky. I mean, you've got to starch, press, and pin. It's not an easy quilt to do. Okay, so if you hadn't noticed, and I hadn't mentioned, I don't know, I've been rattling my mouth. I've been pressing all of these in one direction. It doesn't matter which direction, so I'm going to press these. Well, I didn't press that the same direction. I'm still just running my mouth and not paying the least bit of attention. Okay, I'm going to press down toward the larger tree part. Okay? All right. We did it. I did it. Okay. Flip that booger over. And we're going to press this one to the tree trunk because I want all of them to go to the same direction, down. And that's the bottom of the block. I'm pressing down towards the bottom of the block. All right. Now we're just going to fold it up on there and pin it. So my advice to her was to stop making that quilt, pretty much. I didn't have any advice to give. Once they're sewn together, they're sewn together, and Lone Stars are such bias. There's, you know, every piece is a bias cut. So I hope she can get it figured out. But with a Lone Star that small, I think I would be tempted to paper piece it or... foundation piece, it's what they call it, because it's really a tricky pattern. So leave me a comment down below and tell me if you have issues with this 1/4-inch seam. All right, and there we are. Our block is done. Zippity doo-dah. It is done. And we can give it a quick press, and which you can. I'm not going to press it. I don't typically like to press with an iron until my quilt is all together, and I know that most people don't do that, but I'm a heavy starcher, guys. My fabrics are super stiff most of the time, so I am not going to press this. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up a row and we will sew it together. Okay, I wanted y'all to see that my blocks are all laid out. I've got the top part of my quilt put together, but I've got blocks down here on the floor, and this is the last row to sew on. So I'm going to pick those up and get them all sewn together. And what I do is just pick up, you know, and stack them one on top of the other. Okay, we're back here at the sewing table. I've got my blocks, and this is the first one I picked up. It's number 1. But I don't trust myself, and you could use the little cards that I used before, but I've got these little pins that also have numbers on them, so I'm just going to stick a pin in them, and that's number 1. And there's number 2, so I don't get them out of order because I'm really bad at doing that, guys. I don't know what happens when it comes to putting things in order. I tend to mess it up. So there's 3, 4, and these are just flower head pins that I've had for years, and I took a Sharpie marker one day and wrote numbers on them. So I'm just going to sew them together one at a time. And I want to show you how these there's nothing to match up. You put these blocks side by side and there's nothing to match up except the top and the bottom. That's it. It goes together so quick. Okay, the next block would be 3. So I'm going to go over here and grab 3. And the one after that is 4. And just sew it right there. It's 3 and 4. Chain stitching is the way to go. Or speed stitching. They call it speed stitching, but I'm not sure that I'm that speedy. Okay, now we're going to pull over 5 and 6. There's 5, the number 5. And then we're just going to take number 6 and flip it over on top of it. All right, we got one extra over here. We're just going to leave that laying there. It's number 7. We'll go ahead and cut these off of here. And you're going to want to press these to we're pressing them to the pinwheel block because there's no seams, but there's tons of scraps from the floor on there. Okay, there's no seams right here. It basically serves as a sashing piece. So that we got block 1 and block 2. We'll come over here and get this one and flip it up. Press it towards the sashing or the pinwheel block. Okay, so there's my 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we just flip that over on top, pin her together. Okay, the next one we're going to grab it, open it up, and press it. To that pinwheel block, and then we'll grab number 7. There's number 7. Fits right on the end there. Flip it over on top. All right, one more seam. So I cut those apart, and I'm just going to press towards that pinwheel block again. That didn't go towards the pinwheel block. And this is 5, 6, and 7. So it'll be the one flipped up on top. We need to open this one up and press it also. So we're pressing it towards the sashing or towards the pinwheel block. Whoops. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's block 4. And here's my number 5 pin, so that gets flipped right over on top. Okay, we're just going to open it up and press it towards that solid piece of fabric, which is towards the pinwheel this time. And now I can take all these pins out that I had for marking it and go get the top portion of my quilt and sew this bottom row on. Okay, I went over and got my quilt top, and I'm going to add this last row to it. And all we're going to do is just add this row up against it and flip it over. And there are no seams to match up except for where the blocks come together. It looks like they're sashing, but actually there's not. Those sashing pieces, what looks like sashings, just kind of nest together. Just nest those seams together. They should be pressed opposite directions because we always press towards the pinwheel block or towards that sashing or the frame that's around the pinwheel block. Okay, so let's just stick a pin in it. And that's the only place I'm going to pin on this quilt top is where those blocks come together and at the very ends. we got that last row on there, and I don't remember which way I pressed them, so let's take a look and see which way we pressed. Looks like we pressed them all up towards the top. It really doesn't matter which way you press it, so just do what you do. All right, y'all, there she is. She's all put together. I've got to decide whether or not I'm going to put a border on her now, and I'll leave that for you to decide as well. This finishes 70 by 90 with no borders. I'm considering putting a 2-inch border of the Scrappy fabrics, background fabrics on mine. So, you know, you can do what you want. But I want to thank you guys for stopping by and staying to the end. As usual, there's a PDF that's available in the description box below. It's got the cutting instructions for one block, and it's got cutting instructions for the entire quilt. It also has this little printable here for a visual if you want it. Some people are more visual than others, so I did that. And it also has your yardages for 2-color quilts and 4-color quilts. And that's it. And the alternating block, I'll link to it below in the description box. There's also a PDF for that one in the description box below it. So thank you for stopping by my little spot in Podunk. Until the next time, guys, I hope you find time to stitch up something sweet. And on your way out the door, will you give me a little thumbs up? It's a little something that you can do that helps me out a lot. Bye-bye. I love you.